there's always a huge demand for Demo Day, but this was your first fully remote Demo Day. How did it compare to years past?
Demo Day was always very much an in-person event, and it was so hard for us to imagine what an online equivalent of it would be. So we spent the past 6 months writing custom software, testing out Zoom, load testing it to translate the whole thing. And honestly, it went better than we expected. We had 1,600 investors participate over the past couple of days, and over 25,000 introductions were sent between the investors and the startups. So as far as we can tell, that's about as good as we could hope for. It was good.
You looked at almost 200 companies, right, from 26 different countries. What in terms of the trends, in terms of the kinds of companies that are being started right now? Obviously, we're at an unprecedented time in world history. What stood out to you?
There's a lot about the future of work in terms of working remotely or collaborating remotely. There was a lot about education, of how we educate people remotely. There was a lot happening in commerce. It's going to be hard to fathom how many changes to our daily life is going to happen because of COVID. And so what we saw a lot of the startups this summer do, what the big trends were, is to contemplate what does life look like in a post-COVID world. As far as I can tell, what life looks like is spending a lot of time on video calls, just like this one. It's super exciting to see.
How would you characterize the challenges facing startups right now, not being able to do in-person meetings, a tech landscape that is shifting dramatically, a lot of more established companies seeing layoffs, companies that maybe could have been great, not having a chance to grow at this time because they can't get additional funding?
I think that the kind of founders who we see thrive the most are those that are very flexible. They're able to deal with change, and they're able to react to immediate market conditions quickly. And so we've seen people have to change their ideas, change their market on a dime. And the people that are the most optimistic and able to quickly change their business, the ones that are doing the best. And frankly, the investing environment that we've seen at the current Demo Day is much higher than I would have expected. You know what's going on in the stock market right now? There's a little bit of that seems to be happening in the early stage market, where we're not exactly sure why, but there's quite a bit of money out there right now.
Absolutely. We're talking about it every day. The market's continuing to rise despite some of these extremely grave conditions. We're in the middle of a recession, a rise in joblessness, and yet investors are still optimistic. TechCrunch reported a startup called Trove raised $16 million from Andreessen Horowitz just before Demo Day. They decided not to participate. Is that indicative of a broader trend? Is that a one-off? What does that signal to you?
I don't know the details on that one, but I would definitely tell you, just like I saw last batch and every batch, there's sometimes companies that capture the imagination of investors, and everyone wants to invest in them. And this stuff happens every batch. And so I don't know about that specific case, but it's not like everyone went home. Just like what's happened in the stock market, if you capture the imagination of investors and you get them excited, it's amazing what could happen. I would not say that is normal and standard for everyone, but we're definitely seeing it happen in this batch.
Now, Y Combinator has evolved so much over the years. I've interviewed so many different YC partners, Paul Graham and Jessica Livingston, the co-founders back in the day. More recently, there's been criticism that YC has gotten too big, that the companies that are attached to the YC brand are overhyped and don't necessarily deserve it. There's concern that YC is just looking at too many companies, and it doesn't matter necessarily as much to have that YC stamp. How do you respond to that criticism?
The quality of the recent batches has remained really high. If you look at the number of billion-dollar companies that have come out over the recent years, companies like Rappi or Brex or Podium or Ironclad, I don't know, I could pull up a whole list that are very recent vintage. The quality is definitely there. And, we take a lot of pride in the fact that there's all these fantastic companies to fund. And that's why the batches have been getting bigger. We're not lowering our bar. If anything, it's much harder to get into YC than ever has been. And we see no reason to change that. Telling people we're not going to fund them to try to make it seem more exclusive or something like that, was never in our DNA in the past, and I don't see that becoming part of our DNA in the future.
And what are you doing to reach more people from underrepresented backgrounds? Of course, we've seen this crescendo in the Black Lives Matter movement. I know you've been working hard on gender over the years. What are you seeing on your side in terms of progress?
The thing that's been most successful that we've done has been outreach, outreaching to people at the university level, outreaching to people that are trying to enter the tech industry. Also, if you look at the batch, there's a lot of people outside of the US, and so it's become less of a US-centric thing as the batches have grown. And so there's still a lot more work to do, but all these outreach efforts have shown pretty good results thus far, and so we're just going to keep doing more of it.
So what's your advice to an entrepreneur or aspiring entrepreneur out there who's looking for that big break, maybe has a great idea, but doesn't necessarily have the connections to make it happen organically?
Well, one of the things that I always liked about YC is that you don't need an introduction. The entire model was that you would just go to a website and apply to it. When I remember starting my first company and trying to raise money for it, you needed introductions to people. You needed warm intros. And so the fact that YC has been something that anyone can apply to anywhere in the world without an introduction, I think is pretty good. And I would recommend applying to that person. I think the other thing I would say is to the extent that people out there can develop their technical skills and make sure there's a technical co-founder on the team, that is the single biggest thing that I've noticed in startups that are seeking funding that makes it hard, is that there's no one that can that's technical on the team, and that's certainly something that people could fix.